What's up, everybody? My name is Jake Jakimsen, and today I'm here to ask you all one question. Have you ever thought about human rights, which rights certain people deserve to have and which rights they don't deserve to have? More specifically, have you ever thought about the rights that people like prisoners, for example, deserve? People in detainment, which rights they should have and which rights, well, they don't deserve to have anymore. Now, you could just use the classic response, when people are sent to prison, usually they're sent there for a reason, often to be punished for a crime they committed, whether that be theft, murder, sexual abuse, or any heinous crime really out there. They're put there to be taught a lesson, to be taught that what they did was wrong, possibly to even scare others into not repeating whatever that felon did. Really, all in all, just to be punished for what they did. And perhaps they do deserve to be punished, as they did something so severe that they don't deserve to be walking around the streets by themselves anymore. Now, sure, you could say all these things are true, but at what point does a punishment become inhuman, animalistic, no longer viable or justified to give to a person? At what point are you taking away the rights that they deserve to have as a human? Well, that's what I'm here to discuss with you guys today, as this is an issue that exists in countless countries today. One of those countries that we're going to be focusing on today is named North Korea. That's right, guys, the most infamous country in the world, I'd say now. North Korea has a lot of problems with its human rights, especially with its prisoners, and that's kind of the subject that we're going to be talking about, is the human rights of prisoners in North Korea. And, well, just what prisoners have to deal with day in and day out in terms of their rights and the way they live as a group of people. Now, before I get into my main points that I would like to make today, I would like to cover some of the history of human rights in North Korea. Really, to be quite frank with you, North Korea has had the same really harsh history for pretty much all of its existence. I mean, from the very first time it existed, when the partition of Korea occurred during World War II, it really was always the same harsh, rough dictatorship that everybody knows it to be today. North Korea and South Korea were not separate countries for countless centuries like many nations were. They're actually fairly new nations, because there used to be just one Korea, but then they split apart because North Korea had different views from South Korea. North Korea wanted to ally itself with the communists, which were at that time the Soviets, and South Korea decided that they wanted to ally themselves with the communist-hating Americans. So now you can kind of see how the wheels are starting to churn on how the two nations became enemies and how America began to hate North Korea, and North Korea began to hate just about everybody. So yeah, I mean, you can kind of see how it starts to go there. And from the very beginning, I mean, North Korea was a very cruel country. People were treated very poorly. They were given no rights. They were not allowed to leave the country. They were not allowed to express their opinion or say what they want to say, really. And just one example of this I actually have for you guys today. It comes to us from Telegraph UK, an example that shows us quite an old story, a lady named Yunomi that escaped North Korea somehow alive. It's very difficult to escape North Korea. It always has been difficult, and obviously you're not allowed to leave the country, which is a very, very serious thing, as a basic human right is the right to travel, and that's not allowed in North Korea. You have to stay within the nation. And this quote is very actually disturbing. It goes, "Yunomi had seen executions before. She remembers her mother piggybacking her to public squares and sports stadiums to watch the spectacle used by Kim Jong-il's Workers' Party to silence even the slightest whisper of dissent. Yunomi watched in horror as the woman she knew was lined up alongside 8 other prisoners, and her sentence was read out." Now, basically what's that saying? That's kind of creepy if you really kind of dig in and understand what it's saying. Kim Jong-il was the ruler of North Korea during the time that this story took place, when Yunomi lived in North Korea. She now lives in South Korea because she escaped the wretched country, to be put lightly, really, to describe that place. But Kim Jong-il, who is the father of the current ruler, Kim Jong-un, was probably one of the worst rulers of all time. He treated his people terribly, and as you can really tell from here, I mean, what this is describing is quite literally the government, the organization that's supposed to protect its people, lining up prisoners and just shooting them dead. Now, that shows more than anything else that the country hasn't improved at all in terms of human rights, in terms of fair treatment of its people, and it's obviously not looking out for the betterment of its people, and it never ever has. Now, I'd like to move on to my main points that I would make today. So first of all, conditions in North Korean prisons are really just like nothing seen anywhere else in the world, and they're really almost reminiscent of the Nazi concentration camps of World War II. Just one of these examples comes to us from Amnesty USA. It has a video on there, you guys can go and watch it. It's a very interesting video. It's actually an interview of countless people who used to live in the North Korean prison, so it's a good visual example. It's very reliable because it's visual. It kind of lets you get a sense of what it was really like to live in the prison camps, and the people describe it very graphically, very well. And these, remember, are all people who did live in the camps themselves, so they give a first-person, very clear description of what it was like to live in the camps. It's very interesting, and it's a great thing to talk about. And they describe several things like, I mean, people getting lined up and shot and beaten and worked to death day in, day out, all night, all day. Just, I mean, it's crazy, really, to take your prisoners. First of all, I mean, you're throwing them in one of the worst places in the world. It's almost like hell. Terrible conditions, you're most likely to die from sickness, and then you're making them work all day only to be tortured during the night and then possibly even executed for things they didn't even do. So, I mean, that's really pretty bad, guys. And then there's another example. This one comes to us from NY Daily News, or New York Daily News. But this is another visual example, so it's very reliable. It's actually a man who also lived in a North Korean prison camp, who actually drew some pictures for New York Daily News of what it was like within the prisons, and they're very disturbing pictures. Some of them include a picture of the cell that the prisoners had to live in that was about 2 feet high, 3 feet high at the most, and 5 to 6 feet wide. So you could just imagine people who were a little bit taller than everybody else were literally squished and compressed in these things, and that's just really terrible all on its own. And then there are pictures of people getting beaten, just like shackled against the wall, kept there all day, just cuts all over them, dirt all over the place, rats running around, and then people just throwing up all over the ground. I mean, you could just, it's just disgusting. These people were obviously sick, and the conditions didn't make it any better. And then there was one specifically after that showed a couple of prisoners being held at gunpoint, having to drag a barrel of dead bodies into a ditch. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that reminds me a lot of Adolf Hitler's regime with the concentration camps, and that is really just sickening to think that World War II, one of the most terrible, one of the most animalistic times in human history, something we're trying to move away from, something we're trying to improve upon, something we're trying to get away from, is happening today in North Korea, and that is something that needs to be taken out of the world, guys. There needs to be something done about this, because as you can see, it's getting taken too far, and people are just dying for terrible reasons, and it cannot be allowed to continue. And another thing that's highly unjustified within North Korea is simply the reasons why people are put in jail. I mean, one example that shows some of the reasons why someone can be put in a prison in North Korea comes from freekorea.com. The article gives several reasons why someone can be put in prison in North Korea, and gives some insight on why North Korea has the ruling system that it does. And there's one quote that I would like to read to you guys, and here it goes. The North Korean system is structured around the fear spread by the existence of political prison camps, meaning that the political opposition from citizens is impossible. Every person and the people around them are harmed by the system of guilt by association, therefore they suppress their political opposition of their own accord. And that comes freekorea.com. And basically what's that saying, guys, is the government, the people who are supposed to be protecting their people, are surrounding their people with fear in order to hold control, to fuel their own power. Now that to me is very wrong, because isn't a government supposed to protect its people? Isn't it trying to improve the living conditions of its people? Yes, that's what a government is supposed to do. And here, obviously, that's not the case. I mean, they're deliberately trying to scare their own people in order to keep control, in order to fuel their own power. And that's just really wrong to me, because yes, a government is supposed to hold control, hold order among its people, and keep them from falling into chaos, but they should never, ever, ever be allowed to make life worse and harder and terrible for their people in order to fuel themselves. That's just selfish, and that only benefits a small group of people, and that is not a way to rule a country. And there's yet another example, and I think this is the one we need to take into account the most. And this is an example from ABC News that describes a couple of American journalists that got put in a North Korean prison after going there just as journalists to explore the place, to take in information, and they were thrown in prison. The two journalists were named Laura Ling and Yuna Lee, and really what happened to them is, to be honest, quite unknown. I mean, the theory is that they went there and they were mistaken for spies. I bet you what happened is they took a couple pictures, interviewed a couple people, and they got thrown into jail because the North Koreans misinterpreted or something. And also, obviously, they were Asian Americans, so maybe the North Koreans got confused, thought they were trying to start a rebellion of some sort. I don't know, but either way, it is wrong, and we need to take this into account, guys. It's not just a reliable source. We need to take it as reliable, because this is starting to evidently affect our own people. Not only is North Korea hurting its own people, making life worse for thousands and thousands, not even thousands, millions of people in their nation, but now it's starting to affect the other countries. So guys, this is important. We need to take this in because it's starting to affect other countries. It's starting to spread. There's a lack of human rights evidently here because people are trying to express themselves, trying to make a simple news show, and they can't even do that. They can't even say anything because the North Koreans are just going to take it as dissent. They're trying to harm us. They're going to try to say things that are bad against the government, and then we're going to get taken out. That's just not how it is, alright? And that's disgusting to me, and something needs to be done about it, because the fact that people are not even allowed to leave their own country to travel is just so bad. They're not even allowed to say what they want to say, and just letting you guys know, not a single American has ever felt that pain of not being able to say whatever you want to say, because in America, that's one of the biggest freedoms that we have around here is freedom of speech. And in North Korea, there is nothing like that. Either you say what the government wants you to say, or you get thrown in a prison camp. And in there, guys, there's not such a thing as rights. You just get taken out immediately, get beaten, tortured. Stuff that we don't even know about happens to you. And something needs to be done about it immediately, because North Korea needs to start showing it some respect for its own people and for the other nations of this fine world. So, guys, in conclusion, I don't know what else to say. North Korea needs to get itself on the program. It needs to move ahead because the world is moving on from this way of ruling, from this dictatorship style of rule. Everybody's past that. Everybody's moving on. Everyone's modernizing, and North Korea has the technology to do it, and they're choosing not to. They're choosing stubbornly to hold on to the way they've always been, and that's not the right way, because the rest of the world is past that, and they're just sticking behind and pointing their middle finger at everybody. That is not, in my opinion, how it should be. Fact, not even in my opinion, it is fact that that should not be the way it is, and North Korea needs to allow its people, first of all, to leave the damn country if they want to. They need to improve the conditions in the prisons. They need to put people in prison for righteous reasons instead of exercising basic human rights like speaking, for God's sake. And just overall, they can't be depriving their people of basic necessities of life to benefit themselves. Now, overall, guys, in conclusion, people should not be physically harmed. People should not be taken away from a normal human style of living in a prison. They should be put there and held there. They should not be put there to work, to die painfully. That's not what a prison is about. Prison is a holding cell. It's not a place for people to get executed on an industrial level. Now, despite crimes they may have committed, prisoners are human beings too, and they should not be robbed of their human rights or basic necessities of life. The government should not be exempt from the laws that they themselves create, guys. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you guys later.